What's happening, party people? Welcome to Punchboard Party. My name is Daniel, and tonight we're doing something a little different. This is me answering Reddit questions that I found on the internet over the last week. I hope you find this fun. So let's get to it, party people. Let's see what we got. Okay, so first off, do you have a leader when playing board games? They say what I mean by this is, do you have someone who makes sure the rules are being followed and turns are being done properly? Well, in my game group, it's primarily myself, Brad, Curtis, and Scott. In non-COVID times, Sen is thrown in there quite a bit. Would I say there is a leader? As far as rules and things are concerned, I still think that Scott is probably the leader in that area. So when we're playing games, especially now on Board Game Arena, we'll often try a game that we don't necessarily know the rules to, and Scott's usually the one that has the rule book open and is making sure that he's kind of keeping one step ahead of us, making sure we get the rules right and helping us along as we're fumbling through. I'm usually the instigator who gets us playing a game that we don't necessarily know the rules to, and Scott usually keeps us on track. So I would say that in our game group, Scott is primarily the leader, but not in any kind of annoying or rude kind of way, just in a kind, making sure that we can have fun by knowing the rules sort of way. So yes, Scott, I think you're the leader. Curtis, let me know in the comments below if you think that is true or not. Let me know about you guys. Who is the leader in your game group when it comes to rules? And are they rude about it or annoying about it or not? Let me know. Fun stories too, maybe. So next question, what games haven't gotten any table time in far too long? I think there's quite a few games because of lockdown experiences that fit this category. But I know for myself, one of my favorite games of all time, or my favorite game of all time, is Five Tribes. I probably haven't played that for almost 2 years, maybe? That's too long for the game that I tout as being my favorite game of all time to not get to the table. So really anxious to get that to the table. Any other games that haven't? Let me just look around here. Oh yeah, Bora Bora, for sure. Hasn't gotten to the table in far too long. Love Bora Bora so much. The thing about this question that's interesting is that as board gamers, we often have a lot of games that don't get to the table in a long time. I guess the criteria here is like, are they really fun? Are they games that you really want to play that you think you should be getting to the table more often? Because there's some games where it's like Yamatai. I really enjoy Yamatai, but I don't feel any responsibility for not getting it to the table. A lot of the games though that fit that category for me, I do get to the table quite often. Oh yeah, Imhotep. Imhotep is one of those games for me for sure. I freaking love Imhotep. It is so mean though. It is so mean. I keep on trying to get it to my game group and it just keeps on slipping the radar. So that needs to get to the table soon. Okay, this question is really fun. Are you ready for this one? Sure win game that you would bring to the table if your life was on the line. So this question is all about the devil is telling you you are no good and headed for imminent death and permanent hell unless you beat it at a board game. You can pick whatever game you want, 1v1 or multiplayer. But if it's multiplayer, the other players are also fighting to avoid death. So what are you going to beat him at? Okay, this is a great question. I am seldom first place in board games. So looking at this question, I'm wondering if I have much of a shot. It's kind of a scary situation to be in. But I think I'd be bringing Jamaica to the table. Jamaica is lightweight, family level. It's one of those games for me that if you kind of know what you're doing, then you can win kind of 90% of the time. Because basically the strategy in this game is it's a race around the island of Jamaica. And the farther you get around the island, you start getting points for just getting closer to the finish line. And the whole goal of the game is as you're going around, you're kind of balancing your food and your gold. You need enough food and gold to get around the different spaces on the board, but you also need the most gold to win the game. Gold is victory points. What I tend to do is I tend to, when the dice are high, I play my arrow cards, which gets me around the board. And so I focus less on getting gold along the way and more on just getting to the finish line first. And 9 times out of 10, that works for me. And that's the only game that I really have a strategy that I'd be confident enough to say I could probably eke out the win here. Your life is on the line. What are you bringing to the table? What are you sure that you can win at when you are playing with other people who are also fighting for their life? I think that's a fun question. Okay, what else? Which game do you most want a big box made? Again, 5 Tribes. 5 Tribes are my favorite of all time. I'm not big into expansions. I don't have a lot, if any, expansions for games. And 5 Tribes is the only game that I really seriously contemplate getting the expansions for because I love it so much. But my deterrent for not getting the expansions for 5 Tribes is that I have the first edition of 5 Tribes, which have the slave tiles and cards on them. So I didn't want to get the expansions because I didn't know if the tiles would match my edition of the game, which is just a silly thing to think about. So I would love a big box where everything is updated and everything has the fakirs on it and it's all uniform and nice and has everything in it. So 5 Tribes big box, that would be one, probably the only big box that I would want to drop Cassiola for. So 5 Tribes big box for me. What's your big box dream? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, a few more questions and then we'll wrap this up. I think this is kind of fun. I hope you're having a good time, party people. Where do you draw the line on takebacks? So this is a question about during gameplay when you're playing with your friends, your game group, and someone messes up a move or doesn't understand something and then realizes they did something wrong. To what extent do you allow them to take back their move or change it? Okay, so this happens a lot when we play games, right? We either didn't understand the rules explanation or we missed something in the rules explanation, or the person who was explaining the rules didn't explain a particular rule. And so there's lots of reasons of why we missed out on a particular key rule that could have worked out in our favor if it came to our mind. And so what happens when that happens? My rule of thumb, and usually how we play, my group, were fairly lenient, but the rule is typically if another player is still deciding what to do and they haven't gone yet and you were the player previous, then you can do your move. There's been situations where if it doesn't necessarily affect what the other player's movements are or what we've done, we might let that player renege on a move or shuffle some things around. If you know a full round hasn't gone by or something like that. But typically our rule is if the next player hasn't gone yet, then you can figure something out or change something up. Something that we've been finding on Board Game Arena is that there's not a way to take back a move once it's the next player's turn. So once you've made your turn and it's the next player's turn, even though they're still thinking and haven't done anything yet, there's no way for that player to say, oh yeah, sure, you can take that back. And so that's been kind of a learning curve for us because we've been used to just saying, oh yeah, no problem. And there's been a couple times where games have not gone in someone's favor because we couldn't let them take their move back even though we would have let them. So interesting times we live in there. But yeah, we're kind of, you know, we're pretty lenient, but once the other person has made their decisions, the previous player is now out of luck for changing their movements up, typically. But not in any sort of like, we're not sticklers to that. Oh, this one's fun. How long do you wait to buy a new game? This is interesting, right? What are our board game buying habits? For me, I typically have 2 or 3 large board game purchases a year. So, you know, a Christmas purchase and a birthday purchase, and usually if we get a tax return that year, we'll do a big purchase with that money. And then in between, I usually buy a board game a month, maybe 2 in the meantime, in the down season. So typically a board game a month, and then a big kind of purchase with 5 or 6 games about 3 times a year or so, based on Christmas money or birthday money or that kind of a thing. What are your board game purchasing habits? How do you tend to buy board games. What board game would you play with a date? So I have to say, because when my wife and I were falling in love, we played Lost Cities together quite a bit. So I have a real soft spot, a nostalgic spot, a love spot in my heart for Lost Cities. What I think is really cool about Lost Cities for a date is that it's just the two of you and you're kind of going head to head, and you get to get a feel of the fire that's in the other person, the competitive edge that they might have, and you get a sense of that. But it's also a game that's fairly luck-based, so there's never too many opportunities to really intentionally mess with your opponent, and you can in some ways by holding cards in your hand that they need, and then once they kind of forego using that card or give up on trying to find that card, then you can play it to the discard pile and give them a knowing look. It's cute and fun to play. I just really like Lost Cities, and because I fell in love while playing Lost Cities, I think that that's a game that everyone should play for a date. Again, what's your game for a date? What games would be a candidate for the restoration games treatment? So there's a line of games, restoration games, where they take games from, you know, the 80s and the 90s and they revamp them to kind of modern hobby board game standards. They kind of infuse them with more sophisticated game mechanisms, more strategic mechanisms, but still keep the core and the heart of the game alive. And so the person who asked this question, they thought about Mousetrap, and they thought a cool like gamer version of Mousetrap would be awesome for restoration games to do. So what games would be a candidate for restoration games treatment? And the first game I thought about was Payday. I love Payday. Like for all of those, you know, Parker Brothers, Hasbro games that are out there, Payday was always my favorite. And my best friend growing up, Kevin, and I, we had the best game of Payday going. Kevin was amazing. And what he did is he took this whiteboard and he marked it up with permanent markers, so it made this kind of this whiteboard version of an Excel sheet where we had our names and our accounts and our debts and our bills. I was Mr. O'Donnell and he was Mr. Stewart. You could make your assumptions about us based on that, but I always loved my Rosie and he always loved his Martha, and so that's who we were. We were fictitiously married to the women of our dreams. Make of that what you will. But what we did is we played Payday for like a year or more, and we just kept track of our games, and like when we got to the end of the month, we would just keep everything and start again, and we would just play Payday month after month after month after month and keep everything on this scoreboard. And then when we would leave the game, we had everything saved, and then when we play the game next, we would just keep on playing this everlasting game of Payday. And so I just have so many good memories with Payday, and because of my experience, there's just so much potential, little seeds, nothing fleshed out. It wasn't too sophisticated what we did. We just kind of kept track of everything and had a lot of fun. And so I see seeds of like a legacy style Payday game, and there could be a lot more things kicked in there now with auction mechanics that we have in modern board gaming. I don't know how much you could do with it really, but just it would be nice for me to see Payday given a real nice gamer treatment. So let's see what happens. What about for you? What would you like to see restoration games get a hold of and make into a gamer game? Last but not least, how many games in your collection are unplayed? And I am gonna stay mum on that because that is my next video idea. So that'll probably be a video coming next week, which I will talk about my shelf of shame. So there we have it, party people. Those are some Reddit questions. I hope you had fun. I had fun hanging out talking about those things. Write down your answers in the comments down below to some of these questions. I'd love to talk with you. Continue the conversation in the comments. And until next time, party people, have the best day.